we are moving forward in our presentation. So our third presentation, as I mentioned, will be given by Heather Reed, who is the Chief Experience Officer for RXA. And she's going to be spending time talking about how using applied artificial intelligence to turn real-time customer insights into action. So this is an exciting presentation to really understand how consumers' opinions are, how they're changing, and really how businesses can leverage that moving forward, because it's going to be one of the most important things, which is to understand who your customer is. So with that, I would like to pass the mic to my good friend, Heather. Heather, are you all set and ready?
I am, Tom. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, let's get started here. All right. So I'm excited to be here talking with all of you virtually about how we can use applied AI today to change the customer experience. My career has been about helping companies figure out how to transform the customer experience. There's really nothing that I'm more passionate about. Today, we'll talk about what the Voice of Customer Experience application, or VOCX, is and how it's being used in the marketplace today. We'll talk about a couple of use cases and then demo a third in retail. Domo, a sponsor of today's conference and one of our largest partners, shared this graphic out recently, and I am shamelessly borrowing it for use today because it really brings to light the enormous amount of information consumers are sharing every minute of every day. So to name a few, 500,000 Reddit users engage with content every minute. 350,000 users post in Instagram stories. Of course, heavily populated, as you know, by today's influencers. 300 new Twitter users every minute are ready to give your brand an incredible endorsement in 280 characters or less. Nearly 7,000 packages are shipped by Amazon every minute. That's over 10 million in a day. And on the low end, 20% of those consumers are going to leave a review. So think about how much information is being shared about companies like yours. In these quickly evolving times, internet users continue to increase and online reviews have become more important than ever. So how are companies making use of all of this data today? Well, the reality is that some just aren't because they don't have the budget or bandwidth. Some companies employ folks to monitor the internet for conversations about them, which of course gets expensive and it's not terribly efficient or scalable. Most know they should be doing something, but don't know where to start. And very, very few are looking at all of their customer data in concert. I joined RXA after spending several years working in market research, specifically customer and employee satisfaction. Sure, the quantitative data being collected was helpful, but often it was only one point in time. And we all know that consumer opinion is changing far more frequently than once a year. We were pulling such useful information together, yet I felt in some ways we were just piling on data for companies, giving more data to one part of the organization, but not looking at it in connection with other data in other parts of the organization. Or in some cases, the companies we were working with were really just looking at one number like Net Promoter Score to report on. While it may go up or down, and the survey data gave indication why it had, they ultimately weren't left with a total picture of how to respond to it and impact organizational change. So not long ago, I was looking to change careers and I reconnected with Jason Harper, CEO of RXA, who I first worked with a couple of decades ago. He described to me one of RXA's products, the Voice of Customer Experience. And he truly had me at tying all the data together to understand how it impacts KPIs. RXA is built on the foundation that we don't just add another data set for you to track. We make it our mission to help companies make sense of their data and turn it into action. So there's a lot of social listening platforms out there today, all providing somewhat similar offerings at their core. The goal with RXA's Voice of Customer Experience application is to provide real-time insights into what your customers are saying about your services and products. Combining that with the other data you're collecting on the customer experience and using it as a management tool within the organization to transform that customer experience. So similarly to other social listening platforms, the VOCX uses our natural language processing NLP engine to parse through billions of reviews, blog postings, forum comments, comments from social listening platforms like Twitter, and curates the things customers are saying about your company in real time. Again, I've met with companies who have folks Googling their products and services to perform this task, which takes endless hours and has questionable precision. We do it in real time. We add sentiment scoring, 1 through 5, negative to positive, for trending analysis like others. And we also use theme detection to identify areas emerging about your company. And that's really where RXA's VOCX differentiates from other social listening providers in the marketplace. We also add categorization, customizing categories to a company's lexicon in the areas you're managing to, such as customer service, and we continuously optimize that. We also look at velocity, which goes beyond the typical volume-based word clouds. We identify the categories that are gaining traction to give you a leg up on any emerging issues. And we really focus on data integration and analysis. We work with our clients to develop an analytics plan at the start to understand the business challenges and the questions to answer with our tool. Using advanced analytics, RXA pinpoints the areas where you should focus to improve your customer relationships and in turn impacts the resources that matter most. In a few moments here, we'll talk about how a retail organization provided us point of sale data to integrate within the platform and the subsequent results. Our tool is also platform agnostic, so it can be incorporated into any product, into any visualization tool you use. So there's a number of ways that a company can use the Voice of Customer Experience application, including brand protection, quality control, call center optimization, and increasing sales and ROI. So let's go through a few examples here. The first being ESPN. Now, if you were at A2.AI last year, you had the benefit of hearing ESPN talk about how they leverage the VOCX. I am just going to very briefly cover it here. So they use it in a number of ways, including bringing in their own contact center data and social listening data. In short, ESPN Fan Support offers many ways for their fans to communicate and share their fan experiences with them. ESPN provides social, chat, SMS, email, and phone support. Their challenge begins with having to gather the data from many sources and breaking through the noise to find patterns and actionable items. They do that with a VOCX theme detection, recency, how recently the fans' identified issue took place, frequency, how often are the same keywords appearing, sentiment, how are the fans feeling, velocity, the volume of contact with actionable keywords and sentiment scoring. ESPN also uses VOCX to respond to emergency situations such as a public relations incident, pre, during, and post-event monitoring on their streaming services such as UFC fights or The Last Word Michael Jordan series, seasonal monitoring for things like fantasy football, and monitoring on-air talent allows for gauging the sentiment of customers toward the TV and radio personalities. Ultimately, as you can see on this slide, leveraging the VOCX tool, ESPN has achieved a 200% increase in self-service contact deflection rate in their contact centers, and at the same time, a 9% improvement in fan satisfaction across the board, both really incredibly impressive metrics. We also work with an automotive parts manufacturer. Their business challenge is that they don't typically find out about a problem with their transmissions until a recall is issued. Recalls can take months, even years, to hit the consumer, and in the meantime, the safety of many could be at risk. Of course, folks aren't talking about this particular company's transmissions. They're talking about the fact that their car isn't driving well. We set the VOCX tool up to identify wording and phrases along with car models to scan for issues. So VOCX automatically searches for words and phrases like engine noise or jerk or lurch, and then allows our client to drill down into forums and interact with the folks who are talking about the issues. In this case, there were transmission issues identified based on engine noise on an obscure car forum that allowed our client to interact directly with the customer experiencing the issue. That led to a fix within days versus a costly recall, saving millions, and more importantly, preventing potentially harmful accidents. Our other clients in the automotive industry use the VOCX tool to address other business objectives, including new product development to determine what the market is looking for in their next product release, and new product launches to see how the market is responding to that new car model. So next, I'd like to talk about bringing all of the data together with a retail example, which is a national pharmacy here in the US. I love this example because it truly shows what you can accomplish utilizing the data you have in-house in combination with RXA's social listening data. So the business challenge for this national pharmacy was to identify ways to increase front of store revenue. Sales had declined, and management knew when they got their survey results, which was weeks, sometimes months after the fact, that they had opportunities for improvement, that they needed to figure out how to boost their sales nearer to real time, much nearer. In this case, we started by taking their call center data, their survey data, their social listening data, and their operational sales data, and combined it into one dashboard view, which we'll see in a second, which is pretty incredible in and of itself, given that data sits in different areas of the organization for many companies. We also group that data to fit their hierarchy. So we can look at the data by region, district, and then at the store level, which allows regions, stores to see their data compared to other regions and identify best practices. And you can also drill down in real time to find out what is happening in a particular store. So let's take a look at the actual demo here. So here we have in the homepage of the dashboard, as I mentioned, we pulled in different data. So here you see their satisfaction data trending over time. You see the sentiment data that we pulled in, and in this case it's online star Google reviews. And then you see Rude Cares, which is the customer call center data that is being inputted once a customer contacts the actual call center. Scrolling down, we've curated the data in a number of different ways. Here, I'll just name a few. Negative reviews, looking at those specifically by division. Looking at negative reviews by region over time. And all of this data is drillable down to the actual comments. And then, of course, a region comparison. And I will get back to that momentarily, but I also want to continue down through the dashboard. You can see that ever popular word cloud. Here, what we've done, I mentioned at the start of the conversation, I mentioned that we categorize beyond themes. And in this case, we look at staff, hours, pharmacy products, et cetera. We look at that over the past 3 months. And then we have 30-day negative review themes by region there. So let's head back to the top and let's drill down into the online star reviews. just an expanded view here. You can see they're curated by positive, neutral, and negative. And then drilling down further, you can see an additional view, which each of these, based on categories, drill down to the actual comments within a category. Heading back up to the call center data, rude cares, let's take a closer look at that. You can see based on region, we have that broken out here. Let's take a look. And there you can see, now this is all of the customer cares, rude cares data that has been inputted over time, and it's categorized, you can see, and then it has the rating associated with it as well. But very rich and specific information that can be managed too. I'm going to head back to the homepage, and I mentioned this 4-quadrant guy that we were going to look at in more detail. You see along the horizontal axis, we have percent of positive reviews compared to average rating. And we have all of the regions along that continuum. Of course, you want to be in the upper right-hand quadrant, but let's take a look at those lower performing regions to understand where there might be opportunity. So here we can click in to this specific region, and now I have a view of all of the districts within this region to understand who's performing well and where there might be some opportunities. So let's continue on to identify the opportunities. And here we have the stores within the regions, within that district, sorry. And you can see the different stores along the continuum there. Continuing on to the lower performing, we've curated, again, here's another view of those categories that we've applied to the specific, to the data. And we can see that pharmacy is performing lower, that specific category. So now within just a few clicks, we see the specific comments, not just from the social listening data, but from the transactional surveys that I had mentioned before, along with the customer care comments as well. So this really provides an opportunity to identify areas for improvement, best practices, as I had mentioned before, very specific, perhaps more clearly defined store hours. And let's not forget that there may be opportunities to reward specific employees as well. But as I've talked about, ultimately, why does it matter? So as you saw on the initial slide when we began talking about this retailer, we regress that data together to understand how it all combines to move the business. So we were able to determine that a 10% increase in positive comments surrounding customer service led to an average $250,000 increase in front of store revenue for the average store per year. So not only do you have the roadmap built within this tool by looking at the different categories and then, of course, performance within the categories over time of a number of data sources, but you also understand why it matters and how it impacts the bottom line. So again, VOCX doesn't just surface more data for you. It builds a roadmap for improvement and shows you why it matters to track the KPIs that you are tracking. And with that, thank you all for your time today. If there's any questions, of course, I am happy to answer those now.
Hi, Heather. Great presentation. Thank you so much for going through that. I mean, that's, I would say, a lot of information in just about a 20-minute period. And I know there's probably a lot of things that go in to making those really, really good case studies. We do have a few questions, if you don't mind, and we can probably take them. First question that we have here, Heather, is someone's asking if they want to start, or if they want to get started with the solution, the voice of customer experience solution. Do you need to have the data, their company's data, to make this meaningful?
No, absolutely not. You can start out of the gate simply with just the social listening data, and hopefully everyone caught that. But the social listening data isn't just Twitter, it's not just Instagram, but it encompasses, of course, forums out there as well, blogs. I like to say, essentially, we cast a wide net, right? The internet's along the internet. I like to say, if your company's being talked about, we're going to grab that. And like I said, we're going to curate that data so that it is meaningful for you to manage too.
Great. Another question is, how is the natural language processing being used? So it's a generalized question there. Sorry. Follow-up is, so how is it being used? And do you work with companies to identify what they're looking for, or does it look for it on its own?
So both. So recall back in the conversation, I mentioned categorization. So NLP naturally applies themes to the data. So it does that itself. But what we do is we add categories to that. So we work with a company like Aishin to understand how their customers are talking about them, so that we can set up the algorithms to catch the data that matters most.
Great. Actually, speaking of that example that you talked about, there's a question here that said, how did social listening through this solution for RAV4 not running well translate to a transmission issue? So essentially, I think what that question is, how'd you find that out?
Yeah. Yeah, that's, and I love the Aishin example because it is so difficult in many ways to find and figure out how people are talking about it in such a way that you can identify that it's a transmission issue. So we work with their engineers, and they know by now what people are saying, the words that are combining, such as I mentioned, jerk, lurch, the combinations that would flag a comment that might lead to a safety issue. So it's really, it starts with the NLP, but it takes that human interaction and that intelligence and that understanding of the business to really get it working to its maximum.
Great. Oh, thank you. Are there any limits to the type of data you can integrate with? And this seems to be a same follow-up question, same person. Can you easily integrate with Google Analytics?
Sure. Yeah. Another reason, frankly, why I started working with this product is the flexibility. I had a number of questions. Can you use this type of data? Can you integrate with this type of data? And the answer is yes. And we've been up against all sorts of types of data, and so we're well experienced working with even the most challenging.
Oh, fantastic. Another question here is, you gave examples of a few companies that you've worked with. What companies does this solution work best for?
That's a great question. And truthfully, I wouldn't say one over another. As long as customers are talking about you, then this solution is for you.
Great. So there's somebody that likes to ask some funny questions out there. His question is that real fruit behind you in the bowl?
That is the best question of the day. Thank you. And the answer is absolutely not. In fact, it was just dusted last night.
Fantastic. Keep asking those funny questions. That's great. A couple other ones that we have here. Can social listening be combined with traditional research to create an overall sentiment score?
That's a great question. And as long as there are quantitative metrics, the answer is yes, we can combine.
Nice. That's good. So that'll give, if possible, then that gives a nice overview of the consumer, which is, I know, something we're all very focused on here and trying to understand the consumer's activity much better. So that's great. There's a question, which for those of you, please reach out to Heather if you want some more specifics on this. But we have a new marketing campaign for one of our new products launching this winter. How would we use and should we use something like this for our launch?
Oh, absolutely. If you want to know how it's going in real time and how you can tweak the messaging in real time, absolutely. This is a solution that could work well for that scenario. Absolutely.
Nice. Another question here. You showed some dashboards and some reports. How do you deliver the information that you find to a customer?
Typically through the dashboarding.
Okay.
And as I had mentioned earlier on, of course, you saw the great platform Domo being used in the example that I showed today. But as I said, we work with, typically a company has its own visualization tool they like to use, and we can integrate with any of them.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, so you're not limited by just having to use a certain platform or certain report.
Absolutely not.
Well, that's helpful. Great. I think that, we might have one more question here that we're getting to. So from a voice of customer perspective, can you use that to help predict, to build models to help predict what is expected in the future from consumers?
Oh, absolutely. Based on the data that we're pulling today, and you saw an example of predictive modeling when I mentioned the pharmacy use case. So again, we were able to take their data along with the social listening data to understand how they can move and increase front of store revenue by increasing their positive sentiment in a particular area. In this case, it was customer service. So absolutely, there's all sorts of predictive modeling that we can do. We're only limited by the data available. And companies are in no shortage of data these days.
Yeah, that's for damn sure. So no, that's interesting. I think that's the last question that we have there. What's interesting on that, what sort of just popped in my head, Heather, and I'm not sure if you guys have thought about this or not, with being able to bring in that much data, understanding sentiment, understanding consumers. It'd be nice if you're building predictive modeling to maybe knock on the door of your friends over at Ready Signal and jump in. So anybody that's using this and trying to do prediction, you're probably going to want controlled data in it because it's going to make the models better. So that's an interesting combination that can happen there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, Heather, really, really appreciate you presenting today. Thank you so much. There's a lot of information here for the voice of customer experience and really understanding what consumers are doing. And that's so important now, as I continue to mention. I sound like a broken record, but frankly, that's where we are from all businesses is trying to understand how things are changing. So this is a big, big help. And it really basically is a direct line or direct pipeline into each individual consumer and rolling it up to give information on them. So really appreciate that. Really appreciate you spending time with us. Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for everyone out there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather.